Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Claire and I'm a senior lecturer in physiotherapy. And in this video, I'm going to talk through how you write your study quality results section, which can also be known as your methodological analysis section. So, just in relation to where this fits as part of your process and steps that you're going through, this relates to number 5 because we're talking about the critical appraisal of your included studies, but actually we're talking about how you write it up, how you present that. So we're also looking at number 8 really with the presenting the findings of your methodological quality. So your results, just a reminder really, your results are made up of 4 subheadings. So your study selection, which includes your Prisma diagram. You've got your study characteristics, which include your study characteristics table, sometimes also called your data extraction table. Then you've got your quality of included studies, which will be this narrative write-up that I'm showing you now, as well as a table. And then you're going to have your presentation of your major findings and your themes. So this video really only relates to number 3, which is that narrative write-up of the quality of your included studies. Now, just as a note, this can sometimes turn up in the discussion rather than results. In my mind, I don't mind too much really where it ends up as long as it is there somewhere. So really be guided by your tutor as to which section that sits in and try not to stress about it too much as long as it's in there somewhere. So I'm going to introduce you to something called the 3-pronged approach. And massive shout out here to Dr. John Williams. He's an associate professor and he developed his methods as a way to teach this. So many thanks, John, for sharing this and letting me share this with everyone else who's watching it. So this is about writing the narrative section of your quality appraisal. And it has 3 prongs to it, 3 parts. Okay, so the first part, you are going to use your quality assessment table to look for and describe the common weaknesses across the study. That's the first prong. Second, why is this important? And so this is where you're going to need to drill down probably into some research textbooks to remind yourself on why these key aspects of quality are important with research studies. And then number 3 is about what meaning does this have for your research question? So what in relation to your specific question that you are trying to answer and address? So they're the 3 prongs. That's the formula, I guess, for writing this section. So in terms of the first one, how to find those common weaknesses, you will have your table that will have your critical appraisal study qualities included in it. What all you have to do is you just have to look across the table and find actually, okay, where have I got lots of no's or where have I got lots of unable to determines? Because those are going to be the points that you will draw out to write up for your methodological quality. So go back, have a look at your tables and find the common weaknesses. Now, the best way to teach this really is to give you an example. So this is a color-coded example based on the 3 prongs. So this is a quantitative example here. So none of the studies justified their sample size, which ranged from 4 to 30 participants. So that was one of the common weaknesses that would have been identified in that quality appraisal table. That's point 1. Step 2 is around, okay, why is that important? And so they've answered that in this color-coded blue section just for ease of reference. As such, it could be speculated that there is a threat of being underpowered. So this is where you have to go back and read up on what is meant by powering a study and power calculations. Step 3, so what does that mean for your research? So they've put in a however. 5 of the 6 studies did demonstrate at least a significant difference in one of the outcomes, demonstrating sufficient power for this dependent variable. So there's the 3 prongs from one study weakness in a clear paragraph. So they didn't justify their sample size. That's a problem. Why is it a problem? Because the study could have been underpowered. But then how does that relate to that specific study? So that's a nice example of where they have done their 3 prongs really clearly. Let's have a look at another example. So all the studies failed to blind participants. So that would have been one of the questions on the critical appraisal tool. And a number of studies would have said, no, they didn't blind participants. So that's the common weakness. So why is that important? However, it could be argued that this would not cause any bias, as the population being studied were young infants and were unlikely to understand the purpose of the assessments conducted. So actually, it didn't matter that they didn't blind participants. And therefore, how does it specifically relate to this study? Thus, the failure to blind participants would not necessarily impact on the outcomes. Those are the three prongs. Okay. Now let's have a look at a qualitative example. So, first, we're looking for the weaknesses. So, in red, the main weakness across three of the studies was the lack of reporting of the relationship between the participants and the researcher. And a top tip, normally in qualitative papers, this is a common weakness. They don't report on that relationship between the participants and the researcher, and it's an important part of quality for qualitative studies. So, that's the weakness in red. So, the blue explains why that's important. Reporting this relationship is important in qualitative studies because the dynamic between the researcher and participants has an influence on the study outcome, as there may have been presumptions that would affect the analysis and interpretation of the data. So that's why it's important to explain that relationship. And then the third prong, what meaning does this have for this particular study? So to avoid misrepresentations, researchers must take a reflexive approach. However, in the remaining three studies, the researcher participant relationship has been considered, demonstrating a reflexive approach. So that is an example there for how you could do it for a qualitative study. So this is over to you now. So look at your quality table and what are the common weaknesses? Why are they important? What meaning does this have for your review? And really, you're probably going to try and draw out like 2 to 3 points max. You will need to do some research, some reading around the research of quality to understand why those things are important. And then you'll need to do some critical thinking to figure out, okay, well, how does this apply to my study? Why does it matter to my research question? My recommendation is you write all of these out as bullet points first, and then you fill them in as sentences as you kind of move through that process of writing. So that's what you need to be doing next for this particular section. So over to you. Give it a go. What are your three prongs? Again, it won't be perfect. Done is definitely better than perfect, but I hope that helps give you a bit of an overview for writing that section.